Almost 400 years after the building of Sir Francis Drake's famous ship, the Golden Hinde, a project was launched to construct a replica of the original. A Norwegian-American naval architect, Christian Norgaard, was engaged to design an authentic reconstruction of the first Golden Hinde. To achieve absolute authenticity meant 3 years of patient research. Paintings, historic documents, and contemporary accounts were the only sources of information to guide the architect on the design of the ship and how she was constructed. It was in the small town of Appledore in Devon, noted for its centuries of shipbuilding activity, that the ship was to be built. The aim was to reproduce as faithfully as possible the methods of the 16th century shipwright, and for this purpose the choice fell on the yards of J. Hinks & Son. Their craftsmen accepted the challenge, and in November 1971, the keel was laid. The new Golden Hinde, like the original, was to be constructed of the finest English oak, elm, and pine. The masts of fir. These were the materials, the only materials with which the shipbuilders of 400 years ago constructed the galleons of the Spanish Armada and the men-of-war of the English fleet. To make each plank of wood pliable to fit the framework of the keel, it is first subjected to damp heat in a steam box, and then fitted into place with a combination of bolts and trunnels. A trunnel is a tree nail, a nail made out of a tree, a wooden bolt. The method is Elizabethan, but the standard of construction is well equal to that of the 20th century. The trunnel is a watertight nail. A hole is bored through the outside planking, through the framework and the inside ceiling. The trunnel is then driven in, wedged and caulked. The head of the trunnel bolt is cut off flush with the outside skin. The same treatment is applied to the remainder of the shaft of the trunnel, which protrudes on the inside. The trunnel secures the outside skin of the ship and the interior lining to the main framework. As the timber of the planking shrinks and warps, that funnels contract and expand with it. The layers which form the ship's bulkheads are married together. Here's one of the beam shelves. This is fastened in the same way inside the main framework and acts as a bearer for the main beams which will carry the decks. Some modern machinery, unknown to the Elizabethan shipwrights, was used, as in the final finishing of some of the hundreds of massive oak planks that went into the hull. But many of the planks were prepared in the traditional way, using the adze. This is a centuries-old tool of the shipwright, used throughout the Middle Ages and well into the 17th and 18th centuries. It requires a high degree of skill to manipulate the long handle, the curved blade, and the finely honed cutting edge. It's said that an old craftsman could use the adze to sharpen a pencil held between his bare toes. But the men of Appledore kept their shoes on and concentrated on the planks. The last plank to be fitted to form the hull of the ship is called the shudder or shooter. The craftsmen work from the outside edge inwards, so that the last plank to go in is in the center of the hull. It's driven into the remaining space, forcing all the plankings to weld together. It takes up any slack left by the fitting of the other timbers. It shuts up the bottom of the boat. That's why it's called a shudder. When the shudder is finally in place, there comes the task of caulking the ship. This is done to make the ship completely watertight. The material used is oakum, which comes from hemp. For centuries, picking oakum was the hard labor to which prisoners were sentenced. In the jails, convicts were set to work picking at old hempen ropes. The caulkers would then sit with a cloth over their knees, pulling the oakum to the right thickness. Some of the oakum used to caulk the new Golden Hinde was prepared by hand, but much of it was bought already spun. The seams of the planks have been beveled so that the oakum can be driven home with a caulking mallet and caulking irons. The oakum is wedged solid and the seal is complete. Halfway through the building of the ship, tradition demanded that she should be blessed. To perform the medieval ship blessing ceremony, members of the Elizabethan Society from Totnes in Devon came to Appledore in full Elizabethan costume. They brought with them a flask of water drawn from the river Thames, the home river of Drake and Hawkins, the master mariners of Queen Elizabeth's day. The water from the Thames was splashed onto the hull of the ship with a piece of wych elm. The magic of the wych elm was supposed to protect the ship in her future voyages. And so, a pagan ceremonial, already hallowed by tradition in the Christian Middle Ages, was reenacted in the 20th century as the new Golden Hinde was made ready to sail. But a great deal of work remained to be done. The blueprint, which Christian Norgaard's intensive study of contemporary sources had produced, showed a fine specimen of a mid-16th century warship to be built in the Venetian manner. The new Golden Hinde, like Drake's old flagship, was to have 5 decks and an overall length from stem to stern of 102 feet. Even by the standards of Queen Elizabeth's day, the first Golden Hinde was not a large vessel. Her draft was only about 9 feet, and the breadth of the ship was 20 feet from side to side. This is a knee being fitted. We'd probably call it a girder nowadays. It was wedged in beneath the beam, and its purpose was to prevent the sides of the ship from caving in under their own stress. The methods seem crude to 20th century eyes, But the techniques of the 16th century shipbuilder proved their value beyond dispute. For this was how they built the ships which sailed the unknown oceans and first spanned the globe. But the work continues. Once all the deck planks are in place, they too have to be caulked, made watertight. The job is done with infinite care. These craftsmen will probably know what the pilot of the first Golden Hinde said of her. She's watertight when navigated with a moderate stern wind, but in a high sea she labors and leaks not a little. The final stage of preparing the shell of the ship for launching is for her to be pitched and painted. Pitch was the tried and trusted method of preventing wood rot. It was used by the 16th century shipbuilders as a preservative applied to the underside and all 5 decks. 400 years later, its application is no less effective and is used for the same purpose once again. It was Drake's nephew, John Drake, who was responsible for the repainting of the original ship when her name was changed from the Pelican to the Golden Hinde. The colors, like the name of the ship, were taken from the arms of Sir Christopher Hatton, Drake's patron in the round-the-world enterprise. Sir Christopher's crest bore a Golden Hinde, so the renamed ship carried a Golden Hinde in pride of place as the figurehead. A place of honor which it shared with the Tudor Rose, the emblem of Sir Francis Drake's first loyalty to the crown, to Elizabeth, the Queen. The 5th of April, 1973. Television cameras are put into place and the pre-launch festivities begin. Sea cadets from the HMS Golden Hinde salute the arrival of Mrs. Ellen Elliott Drake Koch, the last direct descendant of the Drake family. She is joined on the launching platform by the American owners of the new Golden Hinde, Albert Elledge and Art Blum, the men who made the entire project possible. With them on this historic occasion are the Earl and Countess Mount Edgecombe, the chairman of the trustees of Buckland Abbey, once Drake's home. The church is represented by the Bishop of Crediton, and always remembering that Drake was a man of Devon, the new Golden Hinde was launched by the Countess of Devon.
I name this ship the Golden Hinde. May God bless her and all who sail in her.
The ship is now afloat, but much work remains to be done. The ship must be fitted. The sails must be made. Once more, authenticity is the keynote. The sails for the new Golden Hinde, as for Drake's own ship, were woven from flax and sewn by hand. Exactly as the first Golden Hinde, the replica is to be square-rigged on fore and mainmasts with a spritsail and lateen on her mizzen. In all, nearly 5,000 square feet of canvas, all of it sewn by hand. The furniture, too, is handmade, carved by two craftsmen from the Isle of Wight, Jack Whitehead and Norman Geishes, master craftsmen whose skill demonstrates the achievements of this ambitious project, joining together and preserving the skills of the 16th century in the world of 1974. Cliff Matthews, also from the Isle of Wight, supervised this part of the project. His family has had shipbuilding associations since before the 16th century. The timber used for these reconstructions came from an oak felled in the grounds of Osborne House, Queen Victoria's home on the Isle of Wight, a tree which was probably a sapling when Drake first sailed. When Drake set sail, his flagship was a man-of-war and carried a full complement of armory, 18 cannons. These, too, were to be faithfully reproduced for the 20th century reconstruction. Again, the methods of the 16th century craftsmen had to be carefully researched. This time, it was the gunsmith's art that had to be studied, so that each stage of the process could be carried out exactly as it was in the days when the cannons were made to fight real battles. Now it's the turn of the masts to be put into position. The Golden Hinde carries 3 masts. The mainmast is 59 feet high, and its top mainmast goes another 29 feet above that. The foremast, with its topmast, rises to 71 feet, and the mizzen is 36.5 feet. This time, modern machinery had to be called on to hoist the great masts into position, ready to accept the sails and rigging. Thanks to the 2 American businessmen who financed the project, and to the enthusiasm, hard work, and craftsmanship of the many people involved, the new Golden Hinde has been built as a permanent memorial to the historic links between Britain and America. Recreating history, almost 400 years later, the new Golden Hinde sails into London.